Have you ever been in a room with someone and felt them slipping away, even though they were standing right in front of you? Have you ever taken love for granted, thinking it would always be there, only to realize too late that the quiet moments you ignored were screaming the truth? Tonight, I want to talk about a story we all know but rarely admit, the story of a woman who breaks silently and a man who regrets loudly. It's a story about patience, about strength, about lessons we learn only when we're willing to pay attention before it's too late. A woman's silence is never empty, because silence is the place where all the things she tried to carry, solve, repair, and understand quietly begin to settle. When a woman reaches the point where she stops speaking, it is not because she ran out of words, but because she ran out of hope that her words would matter. She holds her world on the inside long before she lets anyone see the cracks. She processes pain with a level of depth that most people don't realize. Her silence is full of all the conversations she had in her head before she ever tried to have them out loud. It's full of all the chances she gave without announcing them, all the tears she fought back because she didn't want to look weak, and all the moments where she convinced herself that things would get better if she stayed patient a little longer. The silence you see on the outside is the noise she has been battling internally for months or even years. A woman tries to save what she loves long before she ever gives up on it. She tries to communicate gently. She tries to show through her actions what her voice struggles to express, and she tries to find solutions instead of pointing out problems. But when she feels unheard, unseen, or unappreciated, she doesn't immediately explode. She withdraws, she steps back, she starts to shrink her presence to test whether the other person will notice the difference, and when they don't, when her efforts keep disappearing into the space between them, her silence becomes the last message she has left. It becomes the message that says she's tired of repeating herself, tired of explaining feelings that are dismissed, tired of giving emotional energy to someone who only realizes her worth when she stops giving it. This silence is not empty because inside it lives every disappointment she forgave too quickly, every time she let disrespect slide in the hope that love would fix it, every moment she swallowed her hurt because she didn't want to create conflict. Her silence holds the weight of all the times she felt alone in the relationship while still standing right beside the man she loved. It holds the truth she tried to soften, the pain she tried to minimize, the hope she tried to keep alive even when it was fading. When she falls silent, she's not being cold, she's exhausted. She's mentally and emotionally drained from carrying the relationship on her back while the other person assumed she was fine because she wasn't complaining loudly. People often mistake silence for peace, but a woman's silence is rarely peaceful. It is restless, it is heavy, it is the sound of her heart learning to let go without creating a scene. It is the beginning of her detachment, the early stages of her emotional exit. Before she walks out the door physically, she walks out mentally. Before she stops answering messages, she stops expecting effort. Before she stops loving him, she stops believing in the future she once imagined with him. Silence becomes the bridge between staying and leaving, and once she steps on that bridge, she rarely turns back because she knows that staying would mean betraying herself. A woman breaks silently because she has already broken privately. She has cried in showers where nobody can hear her, buried her face in pillows to muffle the sound, wiped her tears before anyone could see them. She has had nights where she lay awake trying to figure out why she wasn't enough, why her love wasn't enough, why her loyalty wasn't enough. She breaks silently because the world expects her to be strong, patient, forgiving, understanding, nurturing, and selfless. She breaks silently because she doesn't want to be a burden or seem dramatic. She breaks silently because she hopes someone will notice the silence and ask what's wrong before it becomes too late. And when nobody does, her silence becomes her answer. Her silence is not empty. It is everything she wanted to say but knew wouldn't change anything. It is everything she felt but couldn't express without being dismissed. It is everything she hoped for but stopped believing in. It is the last chapter of a story she wrote with love and finished with pain. Men often realize the value of a woman's presence only after they feel the weight of her absence, because during the relationship they get used to her strength, her patience, her care, and the steady rhythm of her love. They start to see her consistency as something guaranteed instead of something given. They see her sacrifices as routine, not effort. They assume her loyalty is automatic, not a choice she renews every day. A woman's presence becomes the background music of a man's life, always there, always supportive, always forgiving, until the day it goes silent. And when that silence hits, when she finally steps away from the energy she poured her heart into, the man feels a sudden emptiness he was never prepared for. It's only then that he realizes those things he treated lightly were actually the foundation holding his world together. A man doesn't always notice how much a woman contributes because she doesn't announce her work. She loves in a way that builds quietly. She listens deeply even when she's hurting. She supports even when she's tired. She shows up for him in ways he doesn't fully understand until she doesn't show up anymore. Her kindness becomes a normal part of his day. Her affection becomes something he expects without realizing he's receiving a gift. Her emotional labor becomes invisible because she makes it look effortless. And as long as she's there, he doesn't feel the urgency to change, to reflect, or to appreciate. Her presence feels permanent, even though nothing in love is guaranteed. When she walks away, the first thing he notices is the shift in the energy of his life. The calls that used to come don't come. The messages that used to check on him don't appear. The warmth he once took for granted is replaced by a coldness he created himself. He begins to replay the moments she tried to communicate, the times she tried to tell him she felt alone, the days she tried to fix what he was breaking. Her absence forces him to listen to all the things he ignored when they were spoken softly. It forces him to see that the love he thought was unshakable was actually fragile and dependent on his effort too. When she leaves, everything he overlooked becomes painfully clear. A man often realizes her value when he experiences the contrast between her presence and her absence. He begins to notice how empty his days feel without her voice grounding him. He begins to miss the small things he once brushed off, like the way she remembered details he forgot, the way she understood his moods, the way she brought peace into situations he complicated, the way she believed in him when he doubted himself. These small things become heavy memories when they no longer exist. The absence of her energy exposes how much she was holding together without ever receiving credit for it. Her absence also triggers a deeper reflection within him. He starts to understand that she wasn't asking for perfection, just effort. She wasn't demanding the impossible, just consistency. She wasn't expecting him to be someone else, just someone who cared enough to show up. He sees the places where he grew lazy, the moments where he dismissed her feelings, the conversations he avoided, the comfort he took in thinking she would always stay no matter how little he gave. He realizes he was depending on her strength instead of contributing his own. And the moment he realizes this, regret begins to build inside him like a pressure he can't release. Regret becomes the echo of everything he should have done. It becomes the shadow that follows him into places where her light used to be. It becomes the voice that tells him she wasn't asking for too much, he was giving too little. When he sees her move on, heal, grow, and rediscover herself, he feels the weight of not appreciating her when she was his. He begins to understand that love is not sustained by presence alone, but by action, attention, and effort. Her absence teaches him the lesson her presence tried to prevent. And once he learns it, once he knows what he lost, he wishes he had opened his eyes before she closed her heart. Love rarely dies in one moment. It fades slowly, quietly, and almost unnoticed until it disappears completely. Long before a relationship ends, love starts losing its warmth, its softness, its connection. It doesn't collapse with dramatic noise. It erodes like a shoreline, one small wave at a time. A woman begins to feel the shift before a man even senses something is wrong. She feels the tone changing, the effort decreasing, the conversations shortening, the attention slipping. She notices how the good mornings don't feel the same, how the touches become less intentional, how the presence becomes more physical than emotional. She can feel the love dying even when everything looks normal on the surface. Love dies quietly because people rarely admit when they're hurting. They try to keep peace instead of speaking truth. They try to avoid conflict instead of facing the problem. A woman will often tell herself that the distance she feels is temporary, that he's just going through something, that things will return to what they used to be. She gives space, she gives patience, she gives understanding, hoping that the silence she's feeling inside his heart is just a phase. But deep down, she knows when the energy is shifting. She knows when the effort isn't matched. She knows when the connection is slipping through their hands like sand. They're both too afraid to hold tighter. Love dies long before the relationship breaks because the human heart doesn't shatter instantly. It cracks, it stretches, it warns. A woman tries to repair those cracks with kindness, with forgiveness, with loyalty, with conversations that sometimes go nowhere. She asks what's wrong, but gets half answers. She tries to explain her feelings, but gets told she's overthinking. She expresses her needs, but gets made to feel needy. And every time this happens, a small piece of love quietly lets go. Not because she wants it to, but because she can't hold it alone. Men often don't notice these early cracks because they confuse silence with stability. They think that if she's not complaining, she must be fine. They think if she's still there, the love must still be strong. They don't realize she stopped talking not because she stopped caring, but because she stopped getting results. They don't realize that the woman who used to argue passionately has now accepted peacefully because she's no longer fighting for the relationship. Acceptance is the quietest sign that love is dying. Not the loud arguments, not the emotional breakdowns, but the calmness that comes when she finally surrenders to what is instead of trying to save what was. Love dies quietly when the small routines lose meaning. When laughter becomes rare, when conversations become practical instead of emotional, when two people stop dreaming together and start merely surviving together, when the reason to stay becomes habit instead of desire. When she starts feeling more lonely with him than without him, that loneliness in togetherness is one of the strongest signs that love is fading. It's the feeling of standing beside someone and still feeling like you're miles apart. It's the realization that the connection you once relied on is no longer holding you together, but holding you back. A woman can feel when she's giving more than she's receiving. She can feel when she's trying to revive something that the other person isn't fighting for. She carries the emotional weight until her heart begins to tire, and when love dies inside her, it's almost always silently. No dramatic exit, no explosive goodbye, no final confrontation. Just a soft detachment. Just a slow fading of feeling. Just a quiet understanding that what she once prioritized no longer prioritizes her, and by the time a man notices the change, by the time he tries to fix what he thought was unbreakable, the love has already died in her heart. She might still care, she might still respect, she might still wish him well, but the part of her that loved him deeply is already gone. Love dies quietly long before the relationship ends because the emotional departure always happens before the physical one. People don't leave when they're done loving, they leave when they're done hurting. The relationship ends loudly, but the love ends silently, piece by piece, moment by moment, until there is nothing left to save. Consistency is the language women listen to because it speaks louder than promises ever could. A woman pays attention not only to what is said, but to what is done repeatedly, over time, because actions reveal true intentions. Love and commitment are not proven in grand gestures alone. They are proven in the steady, everyday efforts that show a person is reliable, invested, and present. When a man is consistent, she feels secure, valued, and understood. She notices the little things he does without being asked, the way he remembers details she mentioned in passing, the way he follows through on commitments, the way he shows up when it matters, not because she demands it, but because he chooses to show up. Consistency is proof that love is not just a feeling but a practice, a habit, a deliberate choice, and a woman recognizes and responds to that with her heart, mind, and trust. Women learn early that words without follow-through are empty. They know that someone can say "I love you" 100 times, but if the actions that accompany those words are missing, the words lose meaning. They can sense the difference between someone who is genuinely trying and someone who is just performing. A man can apologize or promise endlessly, but without consistent action, the promises ring hollow. She notices patterns. She observes whether his energy aligns with his words. She gauges whether he shows up when it is inconvenient, whether he prioritizes her even when distracted, whether he communicates not only when prompted but voluntarily. This attention to consistency is not control, it is understanding. It is how she protects her heart from repeated disappointments, and how she evaluates whether the relationship is worthy of her ongoing investment. Regret is the language men speak too late because they often confuse occasional effort with true commitment. Many men think sporadic attention, big romantic gestures, or dramatic apologies can compensate for everyday neglect, but women know better. They recognize that the rhythm of care, effort, and respect cannot be condensed into moments of performance. It must be continuous. When they invest themselves emotionally, they expect reciprocity that is not fleeting but persistent. When that consistency is missing, the gap grows. Over time, she learns to stop waiting for him to catch up, to stop hoping he will suddenly change, and to start protecting herself from the instability. By the time the man notices her withdrawal, the pattern of inconsistency has already eroded the trust and love he assumed would always be there. Consistency is also what communicates respect and reliability. When a man is consistent, it signals that he values her time, her emotions, her effort, and her presence. Inconsistent behavior, on the other hand, communicates neglect, lack of care, or emotional unreliability, whether intentional or not. Women absorb these signals because they are attuned to the subtle shifts in energy, tone, and behavior that indicate whether their emotional safety is secure. Consistency creates stability, a sense of being understood, and the freedom to open up without fear. Inconsistency creates doubt, anxiety, and distance, even if everything else seems fine on the surface. She can feel when someone is there in word but not in action, and that feeling accumulates until it becomes impossible to ignore. A woman often tolerates inconsistency at first, thinking it is temporary or believing in the possibility of change. She may give second chances, adjust expectations, or silently hope for improvement. She tries to bridge the gap with patience, understanding, and communication, but the lack of consistent effort erodes her patience over time. Her emotional labor grows while his effort remains sporadic. The imbalance is felt deeply because love is a two-way exchange. Her heart begins to measure actions against words, presence against absence, effort against apathy. Each inconsistency is like a small crack in the foundation of trust and emotional connection, and eventually those cracks accumulate to the point where the structure can no longer hold. Regret arrives too late because men often realize what they lost only after she has adjusted, withdrawn, or left. They remember all the times she stayed loyal, showed care, forgave mistakes, and supported silently while they were inconsistent. They understand too late that her love demanded steadiness, and when that steadiness was ignored, it drove her to stop investing in a way that once nurtured the relationship. She responds to daily, reliable actions, and when those are absent, she adapts not to hurt him, but to protect herself, and it is in this quiet shift that he begins to feel the weight of his neglect, realizing that consistency, not drama, is what she always needed. When a woman shuts down emotionally, the man begins to hear the echo of his own actions, because silence is not an absence of feeling but a reflection of accumulated pain, disappointment, and unmet expectations. A woman's emotional withdrawal is a response to repeated experiences where her feelings, her needs, and her voice were ignored, dismissed, or undervalued. She stops arguing, stops asking, stops explaining, and stops investing the same energy she once poured into keeping the connection alive. Her silence becomes a mirror, showing the man the consequences of his neglect and indifference. The things he took for granted, the small gestures of love he neglected, the times he failed to communicate, listen, or be present, all of these begin to resonate through the emptiness she creates. Echoing louder than words ever could, women are finally attuned to emotional dynamics and relational balance. When they perceive repeated disregard, they begin to protect their hearts by withdrawing gradually. They may still care deeply, but their energy no longer flows toward the person who consistently failed to meet them halfway. This is not coldness, it is preservation. Her quietness becomes the sound of the relationship recalibrating without her full participation. The man who once assumed she would always be there begins to feel the impact of his absence in her emotional space. Every silence becomes a question mark he cannot answer, a pause that demands reflection. Her withdrawal forces him to face the ways he contributed to her retreat, and the echo of his past neglect becomes unavoidable. The echo of a woman's silence is also a reflection of her boundaries. She stops tolerating disrespect, inconsistency, and disregard. She stops offering explanations for behaviors that hurt her. She stops trying to fix things on her own. Each day she remains emotionally withdrawn is a statement, an unspoken message that she cannot continue to give what is not reciprocated. The man begins to hear his own failures in the quiet moments, realizing that the warmth, attention, and care he once received from her were never guaranteed but consciously given. He begins to understand that her presence was a privilege, not a right, and the lack of her emotional engagement highlights the imbalance he failed to address. Emotional withdrawal is also cumulative, building over time until it becomes undeniable. At first he may not notice her subtle pullback, the slightly shorter conversations, the delayed responses, the less frequent smiles. He might dismiss it as fatigue or moodiness, unaware that each small retreat is a signal that her heart is recalibrating in response to repeated disappointment. As the silence continues, it grows heavier, more palpable. The echoes of his actions, missed promises, forgotten anniversaries, dismissive words, and emotional neglect begin to reverberate in the quiet she creates. He starts to experience the weight of the things he failed to appreciate, the love he took for granted, and the patience he assumed would never run out. When a woman shuts down emotionally, she often does so to reclaim her power and self-respect. She withdraws not because she stopped caring, but because she has been forced to recognize the limits of her endurance. Her silence becomes a language of truth that can no longer be ignored. The man begins to hear his own shortcomings amplified in the absence of her reactions, realizing that every ignored warning, every slight, Every lack of effort contributed to the distance between them. Her quietness is a reflection of the relationship's reality, a reality that he is finally forced to confront. The echo of her emotional shutdown is particularly powerful because it comes from someone who once gave wholeheartedly, loved deeply, and engaged fully. The contrast between the energy she once offered and the stillness she now embodies is stark and inescapable. He begins to sense the consequences of his choices not through confrontation or argument, but through the absence of connection, attention, and intimacy. He hears in the silence the weight of his actions, the regrets he postponed, and the love he failed to nurture. The quieter she becomes, the louder the message of his own responsibility rings, demanding reflection, accountability, and awareness that his inaction or neglect has caused this emotional distance. A silent woman leaves with lessons because she carries within her all the experiences, emotions, and wisdom she gained while loving, giving, and forgiving someone who did not fully appreciate her presence. She does not leave quietly to punish or manipulate. She leaves quietly because she has learned the value of her own heart, the strength of her patience, and the importance of self-respect. Every action, every choice, and every moment she tolerated without being acknowledged becomes a lesson she takes with her, an internal record of what she will no longer accept. She walks away not because she is heartless, but because she has internalized everything she has endured and refuses to repeat the cycle of disappointment. In that silence, she is teaching a man what he ignored, what he undervalued, and what it means to be present consistently for someone who gave her all the lessons a woman carries are subtle yet powerful. She has learned the difference between words and actions, understanding that promises are meaningless without consistent follow-through. She has learned that love alone cannot sustain a relationship if effort, respect, and attention are missing. She has learned that patience has limits and that endurance should never be mistaken for weakness. Every time she forgave a mistake, overlooked a flaw, or stayed in a moment of imbalance, she absorbed knowledge about the way relationships truly work and what is required to maintain them. She leaves with this knowledge as armor, not to harm, but to protect herself from repeating the same emotional patterns with someone who does not value her as she deserves. When a man is left behind, he often fails to see that her departure is not just a physical absence but an emotional statement filled with lessons. Her leaving demonstrates boundaries, self-awareness, and the capacity to choose herself over someone who cannot or will not meet her halfway. He experiences regret not only because she is gone, but because in her silence and departure she carries the truth he ignored. He begins to understand that her patience was a gift, her love was deliberate, and her commitment was earned, and that all of these were not unconditional privileges to be taken lightly. The lessons she leaves with are as much for him as they are for herself, a reflection of what he failed to notice while he had the chance. The woman's departure teaches him about the consequences of neglect and inattention. He realizes that while she was present, she silently communicated her needs, her discomforts, and her hopes for the relationship. He may recall moments where she expressed herself softly, tried to guide him, or gave gentle warnings, all of which he failed to recognize or act upon. The silence she leaves behind amplifies these lessons, creating a space in which he is forced to reflect on what he did wrong. Each quiet step she takes away from the relationship carries the weight of these unheeded messages, and the regret that follows is amplified by the clarity that comes only after she has chosen herself. A silent woman leaves with lessons because she knows the value of self-respect and emotional survival. She has experienced the cost of giving too much to someone unwilling to reciprocate, and understands that her energy is finite. She knows that love without acknowledgement erodes the soul, that patience without change leads to disappointment, and that loyalty without mutual effort is a one-sided burden. By leaving quietly, she embodies these lessons in her actions, demonstrating that it is possible to move on with dignity, grace, and strength. She leaves a trail of understanding that will linger in the other person's mind, even if they cannot immediately articulate it. The lessons are clear to those willing to listen, and painful to those who are forced to recognize them too late. The lessons are also a guide for her own future. She walks away armed with knowledge about what she deserves, what she will tolerate, and what she will expect from the next relationship. She has observed patterns, understood behaviors, and recognized signals that once went unnoticed. She leaves stronger, wiser, and more self-aware, taking everything she learned from loving deeply into her next chapter. Her departure is not only a closure of the past, but also a preparation for a healthier future, where she will insist on the respect, consistency, and care she demonstrated quietly throughout her time in the relationship. When a man regrets loudly, it is the external reflection of the internal lessons she carries with her. While he vocalizes his remorse, she embodies the understanding she gained, moving forward with clarity and confidence. Her silence, paired with departure, teaches about boundaries, the importance of consistency, the consequences of neglect, and the power of self-respect. She leaves quietly, but her lessons echo long after, shaping both her future and the way those who were left behind perceive the value of the love they once had. In the story of a woman who breaks silently and a man who regrets loudly, there is a lesson that cannot be ignored. Her silence is not weakness, it is clarity. Her departure is not revenge, it is wisdom. She teaches us that love is not measured by words alone, but by consistency, care, and presence. She reminds us that patience has limits, that respect is earned, and that self-worth is non-negotiable. And when a man regrets, it is a reflection of the opportunities he lost to cherish, honor, and truly see the person standing by his side. This story is a call to action for all of us to recognize the value of those we love before the silence grows too loud to ignore, to act with intention, and to nurture what matters most before it's gone as we leave here today. Remember that life gives us chances to love wisely, to speak honestly, and to act consistently. Respect those who care for you, honor those who support you, and never take for granted the quiet strength that surrounds you. To all of you listening, I wish you the courage to value love when it is present, the wisdom to recognize effort when it is offered, and the strength to walk away gracefully when it is not. Good luck on your journey, stay true to yourself, and thank you for allowing me to share this message with you today.